Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Today we have a very special guest, Alison Smith. She is a parenting expert. Boy, how could have used a parenting expert last week. We had half term in the UK last week, and the kids were spending some time with me, as they do, and we had a wonderful time. But as wonderful as they are, they can be quite testing at times. To be fair, I'm quite fortunate to have wonderful kids. They're well behaved for the most part, but Alison, tell us a bit about what you do. What's the parenting expert? It's quite fascinating.
Well, I work with parents. I don't work with the kids themselves. And the reason I do that is that the parents are the experts on their own kids. I may be the expert in strategy or decoding the behavior, but they really are the ones who know and have that instinct of what will work. And so we work together to figure out a plan of action. I'll help them decode the child's behavior and get at what's underneath that, what's driving the behavior. We'll also look at the personal development side for the parent. Perhaps there are some things from their own childhood that are hanging around and getting in the way of how they're interacting with their child. So we'll do some life coaching on that and help them just figure out how it is that they're showing up that may be impacting whether the strategies themselves are working or not, or to what extent.
That's really interesting stuff, and I find it the challenge I find, and I'm sure other parents probably find the challenge as well, is sort of drawing that line and between being their friend and being a parent. That's one of the challenges I find, where you you get on really, really well, but at the end of the day, we are a parent, you are a parent. That's the sort of biggest challenge I find, and it's sort of knowing, and the children having sometimes that sort of testing, how far can I push type thing. And do you find that parents have the same sort of thing, Alison, where they sort of fine line between being a friend as well as a parent? Or
I do, and most of the parents that I end up speaking with they know that they want to be friendly and they want to have a really strong relationship with their child. And they also know that they do need to parent. They need to be that strong leader in that relationship. So they're trying to find somewhere that's in the middle between letting their child have a voice and have a say versus what they know as having been on the planet a little longer of what might be in their child's best interest. And so they're trying to find that happy medium. And I was too, actually, when I started out. But what I realized is that there is no happy medium, because it still is us versus them, or them versus us, and who gets to win, and it becomes a power struggle. What I realized is the approach that I was looking for is off of that spectrum. We're looking for something that's a win-win. So each of us comes to the relationship as an equal partner in terms of power, control, and respect. And what we have to do is find a way to use our position as having more knowledge of the world, how the world works. We have our life experience, and we do have a position of responsibility. So they're looking for this way to show up as a strong leader without feeling like they are at a disadvantage in terms of power. The children are experts on themselves, and you know how they're so in the moment, and they're just themselves. So they have a lot of things that we can learn from too. So we need to have a lot of conversation and that mutual respect, so that we can have that mutual communication. And so we can come up with some solutions together. There are definitely situations where we need to step up as the leader and say, look, I've been here before, and the child may not have the particular abilities or skills or development at that moment to make certain kinds of decisions. So we need to make that for them. But we can always do so in a really respectful, loving way that doesn't leave them feeling punished or disconnected from us. And that's the real fine-tuning and almost the art of parenting in a positive, gentle, respectful way, is finding that little balance between using our guidance for good rather than just using it for our agenda.
No, definitely. I mean, that's the thing. I would think every parent wants the very best for their child, and we all do the best that we can. And it's not easy in the sense that children are influenced by other people too, and when they get to teenage years, then their peers have a big influence on them as well. And I think we can, as parents, lead by example. We can be leaders. We can sort of set the example. Say, for example, if a parent doesn't want their children to smoke, it's probably a good idea that they don't smoke either, type thing. And sort of, yeah, exactly. Things like that really, I think, are really important. But I think for me, one of the things that I think can be quite challenging too, as a parent, I don't know if the parents that you work with feel the same, but for many years, Alison, I felt pressure as a parent. Am I doing things right? And especially because my background and experience in human behavior over many years. And for me, for many years, I wouldn't say textbook, but I'd sort of relate everything back to all the things I've learned over many years in the field of human behavior. That sort of spent a long time and still am learning a lot now. And I felt this sort of additional pressure that that I knew the answers. And I found for me that when I sort of let go and just was myself, things flowed a little bit naturally. Do you find that the parents that you work with sometimes put themselves under pressure as well to want to really give the best for their children?
Absolutely. The clients that I work with are good parents. They're committed parents. They're involved parents. They want the best for their kids. They think about things and how will this play out long term. So they're heavily invested in the role of parent. And like I said, they're already very good parents, but perhaps they need a little bit of an adjustment in the way that they speak to their kids, or the amount of time that they are just in the moment and listening without all of these other agendas. Okay, I need to make sure that they learn good hygiene, and they need to learn teamwork skills. And they have this laundry list of accomplishments that they want their child to have, or they want for their child. And so they can get caught up in the pressure of that because they're high achievers. They want the best for themselves, for their kids. They want everything. They want it all. And so they do, because they have high expectations for themselves and for their kids, there is a tendency to not be happy with less than perfection or less than the best. And that in itself can be counterproductive when we do need to just be and to just listen, because we do have this highly detailed agenda. It can be a little bit hard to let go. And it was the same for me. I still call myself a recovering perfectionist. I started out as a tremendous control freak. I was a teacher too, so you can imagine. So yeah, having my own kids was definitely a learning lesson in letting go and finding that sweet spot between the agenda and the high expectations without being overly hard on me or the kids.
That's really interesting stuff. And what you say, and I would think that in that respect, it's just about fine-tuning things and always developing, and I suppose we're never the finished article in that sense. But that sort of it gave me a thought, Alison. This is sort of probably going to be off topic, off piece really. But something you mentioned there sort of like resonated, and a thought came to mind where when my children were babies at sort of infant age, I developed a bit of an anxiety. That's me being honest. There were times I would come cry. If I could hear him cry, it was like a welcome cry. And I'd sort of go next to them just to sort of hear and make sure everything's okay, they're fine, breathe, and that sort of stuff, breathing, that sort of stuff, really. And for me, I wouldn't say I'm a wreck or an anxious person in that sense. I'm quite a calm, easygoing person. But even now, I find myself at times with that sort of anxiety, and no matter what age they are, what goes on, just hoping everything's okay and hope things work out for them and all that sort of stuff. And do you find that it's probably just me, maybe I need some coaching around that area, but do you find that's quite common amongst parents, having that sort of anxiety sometimes about their well-being of their children? Do you find that sort of a common thing, or is it something that is just unique to myself?
Yeah, it's not just you.
Yeah.
The parenting experience, there are so many things that parents realize they have in common with other parents once they have that venue where they can express their worries and their concerns and their challenges. And it's a lot of, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I I would say that must be an ingrained biological drive, because if
Yeah.
we worry about our kids, it means we're paying attention. We can avoid some of the obstacles or dangers. If we didn't worry at all, we might let them do a lot of pretty crazy things, because kids come up with
Mhm.
some great ideas, right?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
um, it's it really is about keeping our worries in check, and just checking in from time to time. How realistic is this, that this might happen? And is it something I can do anything about? And if
Mhm.
it's not, what other purpose would that worry be serving? And sometimes that active reflecting, and I like your idea of getting a coach. I think everybody needs one. I've got one or three,
Yeah. Yeah.
depending
Yeah. Definitely. Very
on.
much. So. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just checking in with what is it serving? And is it serving a good purpose, a higher purpose, or is it just to keep me stuck and not feeling well because of a sense of worth or deserving or some other limiting belief? But I think in general it's a good thing that we worry about
Mm.
our kids.
I think so too. Obviously, like you mentioned there, it's a biological thing, and I think we're naturally, from a biochemical point of view, wired to. And I think for me, one thing to think about would be, say, from the point of view of animals, mammals type thing, the human beings, we're probably most dependent on our parents, because if you look at, say, I don't know, an animal in the wild, for example, once they're born, they can pretty much from the off survive a lot faster on their own, where human beings, we require a lot more nurturing. So it takes a long time before a human being can stand on their own feet. Um, Whereas, say, you could take a tiger, or you could take a monkey, or a dog, or a cat, and it doesn't take a long time before they become self reliant and dependent. The human species is a little bit different than that. It can take longer. So I think we think biochemically, like you said, I think it's a really, really important point. And I find myself sometimes little bits of CBT on myself, and breathing exercise on myself, and doing that sort of stuff. So I'm well aware as to what's going on. But I think, and there's probably parents out there too, for me, growing up, I didn't have, when I say I didn't have the best of upbringings, I didn't have, in the sense that we didn't have much money. We weren't very affluent. We didn't have much money. There wasn't a great deal of affection in the household. It wasn't, your typical family you probably see on TV, on the Walton's Mountain type thing. And we were quite, I suppose, dysfunctional to one degree. And I'm more than comfortable talking about that now, because it helped me. Too, for me as well, I don't want them to sort of go through tribulations that I went through, just to make their childhood happy as possible, and really enjoy it. Because I think if you can't be happy and enjoy yourself when you're a young person, when can you? And do you think sometimes there's a fine line between the parent trying to live their life through the child? Because I've worked in sport at the highest level, and I see a lot of parents trying to push their child to become a top athlete because they didn't get to that sort of pinnacle.
Mhm.
I've encouraged my children to do sport, but I think it's your call. What the road takes you. Do you find as parents that try and live their life for their kids?
Most of the parents that I work with directly in a one-on-one coaching relationship, I don't see that much, but I do see it in the general population. And I think what makes the difference is that the folks that come to me are already self-aware to some extent. Maybe they haven't been on a personal growth journey or been through programs or anything like that, but they do reflect and they do think about things, and they're lifelong learners. So, you know, they're probably reflecting on, why am I doing this with my child, or why do I want this for my child, a little bit. But I can definitely see how that happens. You know, we want what's best for our kids, but all we have to draw on is our own experience. And if we regret not having gone to a certain level in sports, for example, then we could see that as being the best. And so we would want that for our kids, and without being conscious of it, can assume that that is what's best for their child and that's what their child would want. When we get into that relationship that is mutually respectful and purposeful in that regard, we hear from our kids. You know, when we give them the opportunity to have a voice, they tend to use it. My daughter's a prime example. I sometimes, in those weak moments with a glass of wine, curse myself for having allowed her a voice, but it's in jest. You know, it's fantastic that at a young age, she's 9, that she can step up and say, you know what, I don't want this. And if I'm open to hearing that message, we can together find some other direction to go. But I find it's when the kids are when a parent feels challenged by hearing their child voice a different opinion, it's those situations where often the that sort of putting your own dreams on your child can get out of hand.
Stuff, I think so too.
Oh, I think cutting out a little bit there.
Yeah, no, it's a really powerful point where being comfortable with the child having an opinion, even though the opinion is not ours. That's I think really important point. Definitely. Just out of curiosity, people probably watching are wondering what sort of what do people come to see you for specifically, Alison? What are some of the things? I know it's a broad range of areas, but what are some of the sort of things they sort of come along to see you for help with, or to work with, or sessions on? What are some of the things that you sort of
sure thing
give us an insight?
Sorry. One of the biggest things I hear about is cooperation. How can I get my child to listen to me? Now, on some level, they know it's not that I just want them to obey when I say, although there's a bit of that sort of old belief a lot of parents have running in the background. But they want a more harmonious home, more cooperation between everyone. And most of the things boil down to that. So maybe they want to talk about chores. How can I get my child to help around the house more, or my preteen? How can I get them to open up to me? Why is bedtime such a struggle? And it comes down to, how can we work more as a team rather than against each other? And how can I get my agenda as an adult adopted willingly without the fight? If I don't want to use the methods of timeouts and spanking and yelling and all of those sorts of things, if I don't resort to that, and I don't want to just let them make all their own decisions, what else do I do? So they're coming to me for that third option. What else can I do to get them on board with me willingly rather than through force?
That's really interesting stuff, and I can imagine that can be challenging in one sense, because children being the way they are, especially teenagers, they seem to have all the answers to all the world's problems too. I mentioned there.
Just on on that, I think that's a front, but they definitely come across that way.
Yeah. No, that's me being sarcastic in the sense that you know, for sure, because the teenager's brain's not developed completely anyway, the neurons aren't formed, and I think teenagers, for me, you know, they feel what we feel emotionally. They can't process it.
Absolutely.
And that's difficult.
Feel a lot of what we feel.
Precisely, and I think it's challenging. I think, you know, for teenagers around this time of year anyway, in the UK, you've got exams, and they've got to make decisions about their life, the next so many years. And I think for me, sometimes the sort of system itself, it is what it is, and it doesn't do any favors to young people in the sense that, okay, at 16, 17 years of age, you've got to start thinking about the next 40 years of your career.
I wouldn't want that kind of pressure.
precisely. And I think it would help a lot to sort of like ease back. And we all want to do well academically. I think that's great, but also the reassurance that if things don't go the way you want them to go, you can change it. If you don't like the career you've chosen in 5 years, change it. It's not wasted time. 10 years, you can always change. We're always evolving as people. Just go out and do the best you can and be happy. And do you think also, Alison, this is sort of my opinion, I'm sort of reflecting my views here. I think children these days, in a way, are sort of wrapped up in cotton wool, probably mollycoddled. I don't condone violence or smoking. I condemn it. I'm not a big fan of shouting and that sort of stuff, albeit I'm a passionate person. Especially when we play sports and that sort of stuff, I can get a bit competitive.
Passionate? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Exactly. I can be, quite animated and sort of stuff, and I think, in a way that we sort of live in an age where sometimes kids aren't given the opportunity to feel like, to experience real life. Sometimes parents can sort of go over the top and
right.
be too protective in one sense.
Absolutely. There's too much of just about everything except chocolate.
Yeah.
Except there was that one time, but definitely, and that's a real trend here in North America as well, of the bubble wrap or the helicopter parent, those sorts of terms. Yeah. But I see it even in myself sometimes. I'll catch myself, wait a minute, maybe they can try this, and what's the worst that can happen? And it's about letting them take calculated risks, or helping them think through, okay, this is what you want to do. Like I remember when my little guy, he was barely a toddler, and he wanted to go down the big slide. And he was my second. So I had learned a few things. And I was like, oh, every ounce of my being, almost every ounce, was saying, no, that's not safe. That's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. All those messages that I had given my daughter, unfortunately. But I had the benefit of some experience and reading some things, and I decided to let him try it. But what was different about it that I hadn't known before or never crossed my mind was this idea of spotting that we use in sports. So rather than, okay, I'm going to let him learn for himself, hands off, that's actually pretty permissive as well. And instead of being there and warning him of all of the risks and saying, don't do it, what I did was really close and talked him through it. So where are you putting your hand next? Because he was climbing up this big ladder. And I trusted. That was the big difference. But I was there to catch him if he slipped or if he fell or if he got worried. And I think that's what we need to do even with our teenagers and with our grown children, is allow them to experience things and to test the waters for themselves. So he got up to the top, and I was right there, and I was ready to run around and catch him on the other side. But what he did is he looked down and he weighed it for himself. Like I could see the wheels turning, and I could see that moment when he was like, nope. And he turned around and he came back down. I never said a thing about that's dangerous. He was allowed to experience for himself. I'm not ready for that yet.
That's really interesting.
He learned to trust his own body and his own instinct. And I learned to trust him more, and he learned to trust me more, that I was there and I would allow him to test the waters. In fact, there's this really neat little story about two dads. They're hanging out on a little veranda or a little porch, and it was one of those ones with 2 or 3 steps, and they each had probably around 12 to 18 months. So they were just starting to walk but weren't proficient. One of the dads routinely helped his child up and down stairs, and the other one was always there spotting. Let the child try for themselves, but was spotting. And what happened was the dad who was always helping the child that child actually slipped, wasn't hurt, but slipped on the stairs and had a scrape or a bump or something like that. Because, and the theory behind that is that because he hadn't had the experience of testing his own limits and seeing what he was comfortable with, he just trusted that he's always fine going up and down stairs, not thinking that he'd always had help. Whereas the child who was allowed to explore that was confident, and I can't recall if the child navigated the stairs or if they just stopped and said, I'm not ready. But it was really interesting to see the big difference in the result in the child. The one who was helped and I guess helicoptered wasn't given any favors, because
That's
when
right.
they are on their own, they don't have the skills to navigate. So going back to your original point, it's important to be there, help them process and think through the steps, but ultimately it's their decision. So we need to be there to help them problem solve or reflect afterward, or to encourage them, or just to be there to listen if it doesn't go well, but let them test the waters and make their own mistakes. That's how we learn.
That's really interesting stuff, and that's a sort of powerful point there. Really great observation. I think that's definitely great insight for sure. And the other thing I was going to say too is sort of culturally, and I mean, I my background is Southern Italian, and I grew up in a conventional Southern Italian household type thing, where from a perspective, it's a generalization, in one sense. We're all different to a certain degree. Equally, there are some sort of social norms, and for us, a discussion at the dinner table might come across as an argument to possibly a North American or UK family. We're animated and wear our heart on our sleeve, and that sort of stuff, really. And that sort of worked for me to a point. As a parent with children growing up in the UK, if I'm watching sport, I can get really animated. I'm very passionate. If I'm driving in the car and someone shouts at me, there's a very good chance. Now I've calmed down a bit as I've got a bit older, but there's a very good chance I'm going to roll the window. but when exactly, but when they're in the car with me, I'm just that bit more mindful. A lot of observational learning. Don't be as you do. And I think that they've understood it a little bit more when it's sort of travel. I've taken to sort of to where we originate from in Italy. Albeit I didn't grow up there. The big influence around, I lived in an environment that was sort of a lot of ethnic people were in the environment. I grew up in Australia in an environment with a lot of people with ethnic background, and we sort of tended to gravitate towards Italian back people at that point. All we were friends of all cultures and different things, but influential at sort of formative years. And do you think that from that point of view, it's important, Alison, that as parents we are self-aware? Because I'm very self-aware. There are times that I've done things and said things that, I prefer to take back type thing, but I'm quite self-aware, and I'm sort of extra mile when they're around me, because obviously it's sort of that social etiquette and norm in certain societies that I think it's really important. Do you think that's important from an observational point of view?
And could you reframe the question for me?
Do you think it's important that as parents we're really mindful and aware of what we do behaviorally, and also do you think from a cultural point of view that that's a big thing from a parenting point of view as to what is from different cultures, different norms around what's acceptable and not acceptable type thing?
Absolutely. Every culture that we grow up in, there are a set of behavioral expectations, and they may or may not match our own values personally. What can sort of buffer our children from any ill effects from any of these things is really just conversation. Bring it to their awareness. You know what? Sometimes the people on my side of the family, we get a little bit rowdy and, excited and passionate about the topics. I just want you to know that even though we don't do that at home, that's just the way that they express themselves. They're not angry. They're not mad. Just letting them know that this isn't about you. It's, everything's still okay. And just reassure them, these rowdy people, they're just excited.
Yeah.
Or if they see something in the community that is different from how it is at home, no matter what it is, let them invite questions. You remember what we saw today when we were at the grocery store? What are your thoughts on that? And see what they say. Maybe they didn't even notice, or maybe it doesn't matter, or they already have a good understanding of what was going on. Regardless of what it is, just keeping those lines of communication open. And the way to do that is the same way as how we increase that cooperation from our kids is through discussion, through mutual respect, listening to them, and insisting that they listen to others respectfully, and they disagree, here's how you do it. And it's just a lot of that open communication.
And just on another note as well, where would someone begin? I mean, to make a transition. Let's say someone's been parented a certain way for a while, then all of a sudden they sort of turn. The kids come home one day and they dramatically change that thing in terms of the way they interact with them. What would you do? You have like a subtle transition to sort of parents? It's almost like, say, if we're in a boat or in a ship sailing along so far, we sort of turn back around and navigate a different way. Would it be subtle changes, or would it be big wholesale changes if parents are looking to do something different and get better cooperation and better communication and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, with the work that I do, people can go at their own pace.
Yeah,
It's obviously easier if you just kind of deep dive into the concepts and implement as much as you can, as quickly as you
yeah,
can, and get everybody on board. The nanny or the daycare worker or whatever.
yeah.
That's ideal. But people can definitely start making some small changes. Just set aside some time that routinely you're together. Maybe it's breakfast is the only time of the day that parents can spend together, and be mindful of reserving time to just listen. Forget your agenda, forget correcting them or giving suggestions, and just listen. And that in itself over time will invite their cooperation, just by showing them that you care about who they are and what they have to say.
Mm, that's,
That is the best place to start, is that connection with them, and start to have a little more fun together.
yeah,
And that
definitely.
it's like buying credits. If you're on your child about everything, they say pick your battles. If you're on them about every small thing, they just start to tune out that voice of la 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 la, nagging and all of that. But if you spend a lot of your time listening and genuinely communicating person to person, you buy yourself some credit for communicating in a way that's less comfortable and when it really matters.
That's really interesting stuff, and that sort of raised another thought I have. And we're sort of moving towards the end of time. Really grateful for joining us. I was going to say is, what about in households where the parents aren't together no more? I would imagine that would be a challenge, because different parents have got different ways of seeing the world and what different things to their kids, different values and beliefs. And do you find that's a big challenge, Alison, where the parents are separated, divorced, or whatever? And they've got different ideas about what good parenting is. And in the end, really, it's the child that sort of becomes confused, and sort of, one parent says one thing, you can eat this, you can do this, you do that. The other parent says something else. Do you find that's one thing that is a challenge in parenting too?
Absolutely. Parents have a tremendous effect on their children, and the younger they are, the more the child takes in what they say as law, as rule.
Mm-hmm.
They up to a certain age, they can't filter the information that's coming at them, so everything is
Yeah.
true up to that certain age. That being said, it's important for parents not to underestimate their influence and to underestimate how smart their kids are. Kids know when someone cares about them and when that person is genuinely interested in them as a human being. Over time, they may go through phases where they're showing favoritism to the one who lets them get away with things or always buys them stuff. But at the end of the day, these kids will be adults and they will remember all of those things, and how you have shown up with them will have a tremendous impact on how they turn out as they grow up as well. So keep doing what you do, being mindful of your own stuff, your own baggage, and what you're bringing into the relationship. And when you put as much focus as you can on those things that you do have control over, i.e. yourself and your actions and your words, you will begin to care less about what the other person is doing. The tricky part is that your child is influenced by both, and you love them so much, you want the best for them, that it really is painful to see other things happen to them that is outside of your control. But ultimately, when your energy is focused on your home and the time that you can spend with your child and the ways in which you can influence them, I believe you'll have a bigger impact because you're focusing energy where it really counts.
That's a great point. That's a really, really important point, I think. A really, really good takeaway for anyone watching. And that's all any of us can do. There's only so much we can control. There are biological, genetic factors, psychological factors, social factors that we can and can't control. To a point, I think it's really important that we do the best we can, what we've got, really focus on that, because it's all too easy, I think, to start shifting our attention on things that we can't focus on. Which sort of leads me to another question really around genetic, and people have got different opinions around this area, nature, nurture, how much of their behavior is based on genes, their reading ability, their academic ability, their sporting ability, how much of it is based on nurture. I remember one time I was in a lecture, Alison, and the lecturer said that a lot of it was genetic. And I was taken aback by that because I thought, okay, well, genes do play an influence, but equally, nurture, no doubt, plays an influence too. But what's your take on behaviour, Alison, around nature, nurture, a bit of both, somewhere in the middle? Yeah.
Not my area of expertise in terms of the current research and things coming out on that. And we're learning more all of the time about what exactly is influenced and to what extent. And when we think we know, something else comes out and adds a layer to what we already know. This really comes back to what we were talking about in terms of control and the things that we can control. Maybe a lot of it is genetic, but we can't do anything about that.
Great point. Yeah.
So focusing, listen to the research and hear what's coming out and that kind of thing and take it into account, but really focusing our energy on, well, let's create the optimal environment that we can, because that's really where we can focus our attention. And we are learning that a lot of traits are genetic, they're there, but it's the environment that switches it on or off.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So being mindful of those windows of time when it's most important to do things a certain way, and just doing our best the rest of the time. As parents, that's all we can do. There are so many things out of our control. Learning to let go a little bit can help. But parenting is hard on a good day, whether it's because of genetics or environment or an ex or whatever. And we're all just kind of trying to find our way. Some of us have a little more experience, or, we have access to resources. It's ultimately, we just do what we can, and it's a hard job for everybody.
No, definitely. And I think that, that in itself, I'm sure, people will get that realization, like you said earlier about, getting around other people and talking about it. I think some people are reluctant to talk about it because they're afraid of being judged, they're afraid of what others will think, they're afraid of all these sort of things. And I think that just being open and honest about things is a good place to start, being honest and saying, well, it isn't an easy job. It's the biggest job any parent will ever have on any level. It's our biggest responsibility. It can be challenging, and I think that just being open about that is can be a good thing. But I like your approach. It's very pragmatic. I think it's really important to be that way because theories are going to change, views will change. But in the end, I think we all know in our heart of hearts that things are going in the right way, and we can sort of use that as a signpost to create that environment the best we can. And that's all anyone can do, create the best environment we can and enjoy it. I think that's one thing for me too that sometimes people forget. It's being with children, being with children, it's a great experience. There's no better experience than, seeing them laugh and having fun and going to see a film and the stuff they come out with as well, and, playing sports. And I think sometimes people forget that, what a joy it is to be with and be around them too. I really want to thank you for your time. It's been great to have you on board. I'm sure we'll have you on board again sometime. But if anyone's getting in touch with you, I believe you have like an ebook too available. Sort of yeah.
Oh, just cut out there.
And I was just saying that I'm really, really grateful for you for joining me today on the show. I was going to say that if anyone wants to get in touch with you, if you have any contact details, and I believe you have an ebook as well, which is available too.
I do. I wanted to offer your listeners a copy of my ebook, downloadable gift for them. And I'll give you the link for that to put in the show notes.
Yeah.
It's called the Gentle Parenting Manifesto. And it's a bit of philosophy, but it's a bit of practical too. Some things that you can tell yourself or even say to your kids to keep yourself mindful in the moment and on track with where you want to go as a parent. Also increases cooperation. Yay. Even works on spouses if you've got one.
Yeah. I'll give it to the kids. That they can read.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other piece I'd like to share is my Facebook, and I'll give my personal Facebook. Part of success as a parent and personal happiness as a parent is finding a tribe or a community that supports you in your values and in the work that you're trying to do. It helps keep us on track, keep us accountable and mindful on a regular basis by having that community that has these important conversations. So connect with me on my Facebook and send a note. We'll say hi and we can be connected that way.
Thanks very much, Alison. Thanks for joining us on the show and have a fantastic day. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks very much.